11 p.m. Strange BMW in my driveway, my shower running upstairs, someone else's perfume in my foyer, and that's when I knew my HOA president had crossed the line. I'd just dragged my luggage up the circular driveway of my inherited colonial mansion, 2 weeks early from my European business trip, expecting nothing more exciting than a hot shower and 12 hours of sleep. Instead, I found my house lit up like a Christmas display, music drifting from my living room and the unmistakable sound of someone singing badly in my master bathroom. The smell hit me the moment I unlocked my front door. Expensive floral perfume that had been haunting neighborhood board meetings for months. The same cloying scent that followed Veronica Whitfield, the HOA president, around like a toxic cloud of entitlement. Veronica Whitfield, a 52-year-old woman who had ruled over our neighborhood as HOA president for 8 years, wasn't just a petty tyrant making my life miserable with citations anymore. She was literally living in my house, using my shower, and from the sound of things, making herself completely at home. And the worst part? She was doing all this while I was away. Someone who was constantly harassed by her for trivial violations of community rules. All because of her deep-seated disdain for anyone who didn't fit her idea of the perfect neighbor. What would you do if you found someone living in your house while you were away, especially when that someone has spent months using their power to make your life a nightmare? Drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from and if your HOA has ever pulled anything this crazy. Let me back up and tell you how I got into this mess. My name is Tasha Reed, I'm 47, and 6 months ago, I inherited something I never expected. A 4200 FT colonial mansion in Millbrook Estates. One of those neighborhoods where the lawns are measured with rulers, and the neighbors communicate through passive-aggressive notes. My Aunt Dolores had lived in that house for 30 years. She was the kind of woman who baked snickerdoodles for new neighbors and kept detailed journals about everything, a habit that would become my secret weapon later. When she passed, she left me her pride and joy, a house worth $850,000 completely paid off. After my expensive divorce cleaned out my savings like a financial tornado, this inheritance felt like winning the lottery while getting struck by lightning. Painful but ultimately lucky. The house smelled like lavender and old books when I first walked through it, mixed with that particular scent of quality hardwood that only comes from homes built to last. Every morning I'd wake up to the gentle ping of those old radiators warming up, a sound that reminded me I was finally home. But every paradise has its snake, and mine wore pearls, drove a BMW, and had the personality of a parking meter with delusions of grandeur. Veronica Whitfield, HOA president for 8 long years, real estate agent, and the kind of woman who pronounces community standards like other people say. National security, lived in a smaller townhouse on the edge of our development. Nice enough, but nothing like the sprawling colonials in the main section where my inheritance had landed me. And boy, did that seem to stick in her craw. The sharp click of her heels on my front walkway announced her first visit. I was unloading boxes when she appeared. Clipboard clutched like a holy relic, looking like she'd stepped out of a magazine titled Suburban Dictator Weekly. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said, though her smile had all the warmth of a tax audit. "I'm here about your mailbox situation." Turns out my aunt's classic black mailbox, the one that had stood sentinel for 3 decades, violated the sacred forest green color palette mandated by the HOA. The texture of its weathered metal told stories of thousands of deliveries, but apparently nostalgia doesn't trump neighborhood aesthetics. "The fine is $150 if you don't comply within 10 days, she announced, savoring each word like expensive wine. "But this mailbox has been here since before I was born," I protested. "Previous violations don't excuse current ones," she replied, handing me the citation with the satisfaction of someone who'd just cured cancer through paperwork. That was just the appetizer. Week 2 brought a citation for leaving my trash cans visible after 6 p.m. Never mind that pickup was at 5 a.m., and my work often kept me out late. The crunch of gravel under her tires became a sound I learned to dread, usually followed by the rustle of another citation being slipped under my door. Week 6, she complained about my teenage son Tyler's friends parking on the public street during his weekend visits. "It creates an unsightly cluster of vehicles," she explained, as if teenagers gathering was some sort of municipal emergency. Week 12 brought the masterpiece, a threatened fine for excessive commercial activity because my cybersecurity consulting business required occasional equipment deliveries. The 3 boxes from Amazon apparently constituted running a warehouse. The pattern was clearer than my aunt's crystal chandelier. Longtime residents left their trash cans out overnight, painted their shutters whatever color they pleased, and hosted parties that shook windows. No citations. But Tasha Reed, the divorced newcomer with the fancy inherited house, every move was scrutinized like evidence in a murder trial. "She's territorial," my neighbor Beth whispered one morning as we retrieved our newspapers. Beth was 60-something, retired, with the warm demeanor of everyone's favorite aunt. New people threaten her little kingdom, especially when they inherit houses she can't afford. When I booked my 3-week European business trip, I only told Beth and Tyler. Somehow, Veronica found out. The evening before my departure, that familiar heel click announced her arrival. "You really shouldn't leave a house like this unattended," she said, her eyes already mapping my foyer like a general planning an invasion. I could keep an eye on things. "Thanks, but I've got it handled," I replied. Her expression could have frozen hellfire. "We'll see about that." 3 weeks later, I returned home at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, 2 weeks earlier than planned. The London conference had wrapped up ahead of schedule, and I was looking forward to sleeping in my own bed. The smell of jet fuel still clung to my clothes as I dragged my suitcase up the familiar driveway, already planning a hot shower and 12 hours of sleep. That's when I saw it. A gleaming white BMW parked exactly where my car belonged. My house was lit up like a Vegas casino. Every window glowed, the porch lights blazed, and I could hear music drifting from what sounded like my living room. The crunch of autumn leaves under my feet seemed unnaturally loud as I approached my own front door, feeling like a stranger visiting someone else's life. I slipped around back, using muscle memory from childhood visits to find the spare key under the loose brick by the garden gate. Years of visiting Aunt Dolores had taught me that sometimes the back door was the smartest entrance. She used to say front doors were for show, back doors were for family. The first thing that hit me was the smell. Expensive perfume hung in the air like a toxic cloud. That same cloying floral scent that followed Veronica around board meetings. But underneath it was something else. The aroma of my own kitchen being used by someone else. Takeout containers covered my granite counters like evidence of a crime, and I could see dirty wine glasses in the sink, my wine glasses filled with wine from my cellar. As I crept through my own house like a burglar, documenting everything with my phone, my cybersecurity training kicked in. Back in my consulting days, I'd helped divorce attorneys gather digital evidence, and the first rule was always the same. Document everything, assume nothing, and never let emotion override evidence. I photographed the unfamiliar clothes draped over my bedroom chair, the different shampoo bottles in my shower, the prescription medications on my bathroom counter, blood pressure pills made out to V. Whitfield. The sound of running water echoed from upstairs, along with what could generously be called singing. Someone was taking a shower in my master bathroom, and they sounded like they owned the place. "Veronica!" I called out, my voice echoing off the marble tiles. The singing stopped, like someone had pulled a plug. The water kept running. "Marcus!" Her voice cracked like thin ice. "You're not supposed to be back for 2 weeks. It's my house, Veronica. I can come back whenever I damn well please." She emerged 5 minutes later, wrapped in my bathrobe, the thick terry cloth one that still smelled faintly of my cologne. Her wet hair dripped onto my hardwood floors as she faced me in my own hallway, looking about as guilty as a cat caught in a fishbowl. "I can explain," she began, clutching the robe tighter. "There was a break-in scare in the neighborhood. I was protecting your property as a community service." I gestured toward the empty wine bottle on my nightstand, a $200 Bordeaux I'd been saving for a special occasion. "By drinking my vintage collection and sleeping in my bed?" Her face flushed red, but she doubled down harder than a Vegas gambler. "I have HOA emergency authority over vacant properties during security emergencies. It's completely legal. Show me the documentation." She marched to my home office. My home office? Like she owned the place, pulling out a folder I'd never seen before. Inside was an official-looking document titled Emergency Caretaker Agreement, dated the day after my departure, complete with what looked like my signature authorizing her temporary oversight. "Interesting forgery," I said, pulling out my phone to record. "But document analysis is literally what I do for a living." That's when a toilet flushed in my guest bathroom. And my night went from weird to completely insane. Out walked Dave Kowalski in full police uniform. Not just any cop, but the married father of 3 who lived 2 streets over and coached Little League on weekends. The same Dave who'd always seemed like a decent guy at neighborhood barbecues. "Everything okay here, Veronica?" Dave asked, his hand resting casually on his service weapon like this was a routine domestic call. The pieces clicked together with the sound of a vault closing. This wasn't just trespassing. It was organized fraud with law enforcement backup. Veronica hadn't just been squatting in my house. She'd been running some kind of operation with police protection. "Dave," I said, keeping my voice steady, "you realize you're in my house without permission, right? Off duty, but in uniform with a woman who's been living here illegally while I was out of the country." Dave's confidence evaporated like morning dew. "She said you gave her permission to house sit. Did I give you permission to be here?" Silence stretched between us like a taut wire. "Because this is all being recorded," I continued, holding up my phone. "And something tells me your department has strict policies about officers involving themselves in civil disputes, especially when fraud might be involved." Veronica's face had gone from red to the color of old mayonnaise. If you like this story, hit that like button, share your thoughts below, and subscribe for more HOA tales and real-life neighborhood drama each week.